if you don't mind.
Yeah. Thank you. I forgot Hannah wrote me, and I
All
forgot.
right,
Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, so I
problem.
started the recording. Um, so yeah, let's talk about components. On the previous lecture, we talked a bit about how to create components in React, how to create component with the native methods of React, like create elements and stuff like that. Let me just quickly find it, this function, and how to create components with JSX. So today we're going to talk a bit more about what component is in general, how it's different from element, for example, and stuff like that. So if you look at the basic page, you can pretty much right away see basic component, basic parts. Let's select this for now. Basic parts of this page, like the links, some picture, input icon, more of a logo. I think it's probably also a link. Picture again, some button. You can see repetitive elements of the page, like this one, or here, homes, experience, restaurants. So every little part of this page, everything that you can find in this square or rectangle, more of a, is a component, or it can be in the future if you would like to. So it is a React component. It is something you can think about the same as you think of a function in JavaScript. It's just a building block of your page, as function is building code, building part of your code. And yep. So what are the components and how they're different from element? So basically you create components with elements. So element would be just let's say HTML tag, basic HTML tag like H1, A, B, I don't know, main, stuff like that. That all would be an element, just an HTML element. You can think about it this way. So everything that you create here, that you would pass here, would be an element. Though, as we know from the previous lecture, we can pass a component here. So that might be a bit confusing, though. Element would be something that you build components with. So combination of element would be a component. Combination of components, also component, stuff like that. So as you can see an example here, I used some H1 to create basic component with text inside it and some data. That already would be a component, even though it only has H1 inside it. We would use it like that, like a custom tag with name of this component, some props maybe, and stuff like that. Don't be confused by this syntax. We'll talk about this a bit later, why we wrote this like this. So there are a few, sorry. There are two ways of how you can create a component. You can use a class component. You can, let's say like this, there are two types of components, functional component and class component. Functional is the first one. You created it with a function. So as you can see here, we get some properties inside of our component. And we return an element from it. Same as we can do with create element from React, we can return some combination of components here as well. It doesn't have to be just an element. If you want to create a class component, you would use class, class literal, with the name of this component that would extend from component. Component is a part of React library, so it would be more of a like this. Component from React, like this. So it's just a class that you import from React. So you can extend already existed component class from React with your own one, adding certain methods, adding certain UI to it. So basically, to create some simple component, if you want it to be a class component, you always need to have a function render that would return your JSX. Here I return some h1, simply same as here. Yeah, that's a more complicated example of the component that was created like a class component. Here, as you can see, I have a constructor. From, I think, React 16, we don't have to have a constructor here. We can just write, maybe I have a better example. No, I don't. Never mind. So yeah, we don't need to have a constructor. We can just write the properties that we want to have there right away. Super in this function super, you should be already you should know it already from I don't know, lecture from about classes and nesting and inheritance, stuff like that. Simply as in a basic class, you want work with methods of the parent class in your child class. So to work for properties to work with for properties to work with the props before you had to use super like this. Now again, you don't have to do this. That's cool and nice. But yeah, you won't always work with the newest version of React. Sometimes you might appear on a project that has a previous version of React or supports some legacy code. So it is always nice to know what was before and how to deal with it. Okay, let's go next. So a bit more about class components. So here, as you can see, we have class component that extended from component and something like pure component. They both, again, come from React library, and they are a bit different in a way of performance. So pure component, maybe I have written here, so if you would like to read, or someone who would look for recording would like to read this. So pure components are more performable in a way that they do comparison of the changes that has happened before. So again, in the previous lecture, we talked a bit about this, about how React knows what has been changed and what to change directly without changing all DOM. So here again, pure component would add more of a optimization on this process. So pure component will do a shallow comparison on both props and state. Component won't. It would compare props and state directly. So pure component sometimes might be better for you, though don't use it too much. Be smart about it. Know where you need to use your pure component and where you won't. Composing components, yeah. So React is all about composition. If you go to if you go to React documentation and look for composition, you would find composition. No, never mind. if you go to the React documentation, look for composition, they directly say that, hey guys, we encourage you to use composition, not inheritance, to create your component. So as you see, as we use classes, you might be tempted to use inheritance to create some similar components. For example, here I created a component welcome message. Maybe I would like to add some, no, here. Maybe I would like to add some more complex things, maybe some more methods or functions, or wrap it in some new UI, maybe add some div around it. You might be tempted to use inheritance as a class. Might be better, might be easier, maybe more native for someone who's been working with React JS already. So it goes across React philosophy, let's say like this. They encourage you to use composition just because it's simpler. They didn't, as they say, they didn't find a reason to use inheritance. So please don't. So what is composition? Basically, you just combine your components in the way you want them to be, and that's it. So maybe you have some questions at this point. So we kind of don't build up questions and misunderstanding. No. Okay, cool. Let's go further and talk about state and props. So a little bit before I mentioned state and props when I've been describing you a pure component. So what is that? Sorry, just give me a second. Yep, hello, I'm here again. Yep. So, state. As we've talked already before, we manipulate UI in React, changing data that this UI presents. And state and props are methods and ways for you to do that. So state can be defined as a data that component holds, let's say like that, data that represent this component. So here on this example, on the class component, there is some state that component hold. The state, the counter 0, we have also a few methods decrease, increase. These are not interested for us now. We would like to look only in this dot state. So this component do some counting. Probably we might want to add here button to increase and decrease our content, but that's not the point. So here, as you can see, we have counter, we have method decrease to kind of change it, and increase to move it up. So we would show this counter in our div here, like that. So this would be named as a state of the component. So it's inner state, what this component holds and changes inside of itself. And here is example of the prop. So some properties came to this app component. This property name is title, and we also can output it. So that's might be kind of weird. So why do we have props and state separately? So props is something that comes outside of the component. Maybe probably this app component is a child of some other component. So this property would come from this parent component, and we see in a minute how we can do that. So as we have state in our component, we might also not have this state, and logically enough, both of these components would be named stateful and stateless. Most of your components in your application will be stateless, and that's absolutely okay, because you won't need it basically. And another reason why you won't want to create a lot of stateful components is that at some point of a time you would just forget where what is stored. So you would like to create some one parent smart stateful component that would hold all of the data for you, and just pass it down to its children with props, which are stateless. They don't have its own state. So here's an example. We have our class component to do container. It has some methods. For now, we won't talk about it. It's a lifecycle method. It's its own inner method. We have method render, usually in a class component. We have inner component to do list, where we pass prop list from our state. So this to-do list would get a prop list and somehow work with it. Here we can see this prop that we pass from the parent, we get it, we do something without it. Here we create some kind of list. As you might see, as we use map, this is not really good syntax, as we need to have key for a list for better reconciliation of these components. And we have another child component, filters pane. We pass here two props, simply that. First, again, from the state. The second one is some kind of method. This one, boom, yeah. We get these props here. We put them in the event of the button. Here you see an example how we can create event handlers in React, which I mentioned in the previous lecture. So this component is what is interesting for us now. This is a nice example of how we can change state of the parent component from a child. So it's clear how we did it from parent component. We have state there. We can create some kind of functions, methods inside of it and call again inside of this component. Though sometimes we would like to do this from a parent component. For example, we have, like here, we have a bigger component to do container, and we have a combination of different components inside it. And more specific one, filters pane, would want to do some filtering. So to change state, we always have to call method this dot set state. It comes from React component. Why we cannot mutate state directly? Well, because state is just a property. It's nothing fancy, it's nothing crazy, it's just a property of a class. And in order to all your UI to be changed, when this property changed, we would need some kind of listener that might be logical. Though here is a more optimal solution that was created by React devs. We just call a specific function that under the hood would change state and call re-render of all UI. So UI would be updated when we call this specific function. So you can think about it like we always say that we change data and then UI changes. Yeah, on the surface. Though under the hood, we just call a method that change data and update UI, something like that. So if you would be tempted to mutate your state directly, you can go with it, though nothing would happen. And this is considered as a bad practice, so I would not recommend that. So here again, as we can see, we pass this function from a parent to the child from the prop. We call it on click, and this would change state of the parent as we use bind here. So we bind this of the parent to the container to this function, and whenever we call this function, it would always be called with this binded to the container. So you can pass this function, this like this, all the way down, however you want, whenever you like. This would always be binded to this to the container, and on the call, it would change its state. That's how we change state of the parent from the child. That concept might be a bit confusing and weird, though when you put your hands down on it, it would be easier. And if you have your questions here, I'm happy to answer them, maybe explain something one more time. Feel free to ask me. No? Okay. So as you can see here, to-do containers, stateful, filters pane, to-do lists are stateless. Yep, this is the example in a scheme of how all of these things work that I described it to you. So we can we create some kind of function, maybe on delete, pass it as a property to our child, bind it to this of the parent, call it inside the parent, and this would call set state of the parent and change its state. Simply as that. Again, same thing explained. We have our component, our parent component list. We have some state inside it. As you can see, pretty complicated. We have a few items here. We have a method on delete that changes state. It filters item. We pass here an index of this item that we want to delete, and it just filters it out. Yeah, the other thing I want to mention about set state here, you need to pass only parts that you want to change. So it's not really clear from here, but if you would have a few properties in state, like items, maybe some counter, maybe items too, I don't know, some name or stuff like that. So here would be a lot of properties. Here on the set state, you would need to pass only properties that has changed. Set state would do everything for you. Yep. So yeah, we filter out our items. Boop. We render some list from map, from state, simply as that. Every item is a new stateless item. Here we pass the key, use the name, not an index. Passing the item itself, and to every item we pass on delete. Yeah, we pass on delete function that is binded to the parent. This is a nice example of how why we would want to change state of the parent from the child. So basically something, it would look like some list of the elements with here with the element of the name and the button to delete this item. To hold the state in every single item wouldn't be logical, and this won't work for in the long term to removing it. So we kind of hold this all data in the parent of all of these items in order to manipulate it somehow. So here on a click, I call on delete from props and I pass item, which is a holder of all the data of the item with a name and ID, I presume. Yep, so E is an element. Yep, so we pass on delete the item that we want to delete, and this would it would be deleted from our list of the items. And after that, when this state changes, the render would happen as we call the set state function. Yeah, so one problem that might appear when you develop your application is called a props drilling. When you pass your props very through the very long nesting chain, let's say like that. So all the way down from the first parent to like 10th child. That's a bad practice, and this will inevitably end up in a confusing and spaghetti code, as you won't remember anymore where this prop came from. So here you can see an example of such a thing. So here I have a component app with some state. Oh yeah, by the way, this is a nice example because here you can see that I don't use a constructor anymore. I don't need a super and stuff like that. I can just write state right here, like that in my component. This came with ES6. Bless it. Yep. So here I have a component with some state, render, everything is always. I pass property app to my header and movies to my movie list. Great. Here in header, I get my app and pass profile menu data from this app to the profile menu. And only here I do something with that. Again, in the movie list, I passed movies. I created a map of these movies, and I use unique ID and the movie itself to create some movie cards. This example is not that bad, as there is no other way to kind of implement this thing. This could have been avoided because we don't, in the header component, we don't really need everything from app. There might be a bunch of components, bunch of properties, sorry. And we only need title and profile menu data. So you might be tempted to just pass, and it would be better to pass exact properties that you need in this header instead of passing the whole object. This is the first point. Second point is that profile menu data would come all the way from this component to that. So it kind of jumped through one additional component, and in real development, this middleware component might be much more like 3 till 5, and that's really crazy. So how yeah, this is kind of a scheme. So we kind of have a stateful component, our parent, all of the child of which are stateless. Here is fine. We pass prop directly to the component. This situation might be also fine, but you might consider already this is a problem. This in the middle is a disaster. We pass a props to a component that pass the same props to this component. This component passes to other children. That's crazy. That's not good. You'll be your brain will break at this point. So how we can change it? So React has a nice solution for you. It is a context. So basically it would create scope for all components in your application, and you might give access to this scope from any point in your application. You create the scope in the parent component, and then you can expose your inner component, your child components to the scope. So it's a neat way to pass state across the AMP without having to use props. And this is a way, it's already a one step to the state management of your application, and something between doing nothing about your state management and using Redux. Somewhere in between. It's more simple, and Redux under the hood also uses context APIs. So for some small applications or application that doesn't need some asynchronous request or something like that, context API is a nice solution. So you might consider using that. So basically how it works, we have parent component, some childish component, child component, and another child component. So here in the example, we pass props food all the way down to the child component. Using context, we create this foo property in the parent and just expose our child component to this context and use it inside of it. So these two components don't need to know about this foo property. So styling. There are a few methods that you might use for your styling, and basic inline styles, we found them before in the lecture. CSS or as CSS style sheets, CSS modules, and style components. So let's talk about every single one of them one by one. So inline styles, they're good with small applications, easy to understand, and you use your styles right away inside your JS, so you don't have a bunch of files and stuff like that. As you can see, styles inside JSX, it's more correct name, we'll use object notation. You would write it as an object, and if you want to write it right away in the style, don't forget that you would have double brackets, and this is only because this brackets is for React property, and this is for creating an object, so don't forget about this. You can also pass this like this. Again, this is an object. Simple as that. Here, div styles, as you can see, are passed as a separate variable, but this is not good for performance. It's confusing. It confuses you with a camel case, because if you would like to add something that uses camel case, like margin top, as this is an object, and this is basically GS. You won't be allowed to do that, as this would be considered as an operator minus. So you would need to do like this, and it might be a little bit confusing, especially when you start. It's not really good for large application as sorry. Not really good for large applications, as you would have a lot of big, really giant components in these applications, and adding more volume to these components won't be a good solution. This also not really good for style animations, for media queries, and reference pseudo classes and elements. That might be, you won't be able to do this in the inline styles. So we might consider using style sheets. It is good with large applications, as we separate styles from our components. It's easy to reuse as we create, again, separate files. Here I created separate footer component file with SCSS, and I use it in my component. Here I just imported it like this, and it works. Yeah, so the thing that styles are outside of GS is great. But there are also some few drawbacks. When you create big applications, problem of scope comes comes into your house. So you would have a lot of repetitive classes, or you might be tempted to create a lot of repetitive classes. That's why we use stuff like BEM notation or stuff like that to avoid scope issues. Though here creating a lot of styles like this might be not really a good solution. So, but that's fine. It's already much better than using inline styles, and this fine with your pet application. Though if you want to go on one step further, you would want to use CSS modules. They solve problem with scoping. So how they work? You again would have separate CSS file, or as here as CSS file with your classes for your styles and stuff like that. You would import it inside of your component, though in a little bit different way. So here, as you can see, I imported like it is an object. Here, I imported just like style. Then I use the properties of this object to pass it in a class name. Sorry. To pass it as a class name for my component. And here where the real magic happens, in the resulted HTML, they would be represented with a hash, like here with unique hash for every build, that would be a unique hash. So your Webpack would compile them, not them, but your CSS files and your JSX files into this sort of thing where unique hash would be added to every single class that you used in your module. That's why even if you use the same names in every single file of your styles, name for a class, adding hash would make it unique for this certain specific component. That's why you won't have problem with scope. So yeah, it's again good with large applications, no scope issue, and easy to reuse again. But you would need to do a few extra steps for Webpack configuration. It was a problem, I guess, before. For now, it's quite easier. I think you just need to add .module to the name of your file. And with React 16, it would work from scratch. With Create React App, I think for sure, with a custom configuration, that might not be the case, but yeah, with Create React App, this would work from the box. And yeah, it's an overkill for a small app. If you create like a to-do list, you might not want to do that. Previous step with style sheet might be fine for you. And the last but not least, style components. The plus of this approach is that we have GS, CSS, and HTML in one file, though they are separated, not like we had here when we had styles and JS6 and everything combined, all bulky and weird. We have our style component separately. So basically what style component is a simple description of your future component. Here I created, I use a library style components, exported styled from here, and to create a component, a button, the tag button would be used to create this component. I use style.button, and like that. As you can see, just right from the button, I started my string with the styling. I would write my styles in a syntaxes of CSS. Then to use this, I would use it just like a simple component, which was created before, instead of just using button, and this button would be already styled as well as this container. So if the result at HTML, this would be div, this would be div, this would be a simple button, or certain styled attached state classes would be created by style components under the hood. You won't need to worry about them. So it's really easy to reuse such components. You don't need to do any additional configuration. You just download this library and go with it. Though there are a few known performance issues with this approach, you need additional library for the project, which again would slower your downloading of your page. So that's just another few kilobytes of data. Not really good. Your code might become a bit messy, as you would have components that represent some work with data. You would have styled components, you would have stateless components. I personally don't really like this approach. And again, as it was a plus for this approach, GSS and HTML in one file can be a drawback, as everything in one for a big component that's not a good solution. But if you like it, I encourage you to try it again to find how do you feel about it, and maybe you would like it. Maybe it would be easier for you than using CSS modules or style sheets, though my personal favorite is the CSS modules, as they are still same as just using files, though add a bit more of a performance just to the to your work with styling. Whew. So maybe you have questions here about styling, about context, maybe about props and state and stuff like that. Okay, okay, let's go further. So, single page application. When we start our journey with React, we start hearing this abbreviation more and more. Single page application. React is the best for single page application. React is created to create single page application, but what is a single page application? How it's different from just a basic website? Why it's called single page application? So let's find out. So single page application is let's go back. Yeah, let's talk about it from here. So single page application is same as basically for just for user, it would look same as just basic website, though it have just one interesting property in it. So let's go. You don't see my screen. I forgot. This one. So let's go to Airbnb. So single page application just a little bit different from a basic page because it doesn't reload the page. So that's why it's called single page application. You kind of walks through multiple pages what looks like, though as you can see this, you can look at this icon. Oops, I opened a new one. Okay. Maybe if I go here, as you can see here, I walked to a different page. So I left the previous single page application and walked to a new page, probably a new single page application. For a page that doesn't support single page application, this, look here, this jump won't use would happen with a page reload. So again, we're looking here. I am looking for something. I'm gonna go to London for a long time, and I want to search. As you can see here, nothing happened. Page didn't reload, but for a user, it's already a different page, and for application, it's already a different page. If I was on a page that on application that doesn't use React and single page application feature. Let's try. Yeah, so here, as you can see, reload happened. Again, I'm going on a different page. Here, how to go back? Let's try. Yeah, you can see page didn't reload. We're jumping through the pages of single page application here. So single page application can need to use some state to create at least a first render of the page. So here we have two options for to use internal state and to use external state, some location based. For example, here I'm started with some application entry. Here, as you can see, nothing changes. It is a URL line. So I click in some button. I'm navigating to some new location of this, like here. So I'm flexible. I jump to some page, and if I want to share this this page to my friend, for example, I simply would copy the link and pop it to him, and he would pass it into the URL of his URL line of his browser and do like that. So here he would expect that the exact page I shared would appear, and that's true for Airbnb. And this is the external state, the example of usage of the external state. So something in the URL says to this page that this exact combination of housing should appear. If we talk about internal state, that means that, as you can see, I have some URL changed here. Even though I stay in the same page. Reload didn't happen here. As you can, oops, let's demonstrate it too. So here you can see I'm on airbnb.com. I click flexible, reload didn't change, URL changed. Boom, magic. We talk about it a bit later, how this happens. So here URL changes, and this is called location based because we use location from URL to determine which page should be loaded and with what data. Here nothing changed in URL, some internal state, probably some Redux or local storage or something like that used to create this page. And in this case, if I share this link, not like that, link for this page to my friend, he would go here, because for him, internal state of this page is empty, nothing, he did nothing there. And most applications use external state. Is it just better for user experience and stuff like that? So let's talk a bit about URL and how it's used for creating external location-based state for your single-page application. So how do this magic when we change our URL but page doesn't reload. we change, there are two ways. We can change only hash fragment. So maybe you faced with what hash is in the URL. So basically, maybe you've used it to create anchors for your page. So let me find some ID. It's a script. Perfect. Okay, let me just create one. Inspect element. Let's add some ID here. So I created some ID for random component on the page, this one. So hashes before React and in general page creation, hashes can be used to create anchors for your page to just scroll to scroll to your component. How it used, I forgot. Where is this symbol? Oh, here it is. So, boom. As you can see, page reloaded here, but I scrolled down to the view of this component. So, same would be with changing your URL for hashes. So, yeah. So, this is an old-fashioned way. We don't use it anymore, though sometimes you can face it. And for most modern one, you use a history API. This is something that browser provides you, and we can work with it to manipulate our URL. So basically, what is URL? Everything that you see here is stored in the window location. Here, let's look at it. Clear window location. So as you can see, there you go. I have a lot of stuff here. I have hash, hello world, the stuff I added here. I have host, I have host name, look the same, though they are a little bit different thing. I have full href of the page. Everything that you can find this line is here. Origin, again, looks same as host and host name, though it's a little bit different. As you can see, it uses HTTPS protocol here for name. Pass name as homes. So what is that? So as you can see here, basically everything that goes after the question mark is a query or search request. You can see it like that. So here you can find it in the search property. So everything that before this giant line is a pass name, pass on your origin to certain page. So this query, let's get rid of this. This query is used to pass some data from URL basically to you. So this basic GET request. And this exact data is used to somehow determine that, hey, user that request this page using this host, origin, and query need this direct page. You have access to all data that is passed here. You can use it to do certain AJAX requests to the backend for certain data. So here, as you can see, let's look at that. So homes and date picker type. And is used to separate different parts of the query. So this is a one property. Date picker type equals flexible dates. This one is another. Refinement pass, blah, blah. There's some certain symbols, %2, I think it's a space or something like that. So don't bother with them. Again, search mode, flex destinations search. So This all is used to get some certain data for you to specify the exact page. Protocol, HTTPS. It can be HTTP, though safe sites don't use HTTP and it's prohibited for them. So everything you can see here, everything that creates your URL is held in the location. And you can get anything you want from the location. So instead of using History API directly, though you can create same effect without React. You're free to do this, manipulating History API directly. Though React provides, there is a specific library for that, React Router. It's not connected to React directly. It was created by a separate team. Though, yeah, the certain solutions are already provided for you with this library. So there are a few basic components in this library. Let's go to the documentation. So there are basic components of this library. As you can see, it has a really nice documentation with lots of examples with text. You can read it. It's great. So basic components, it's router component, navigation component, and road matching component. So router component. Router component can be 4 types: browser router, hash router, memory router, and static router. Most of the time, applications use browser router. We'll talk about it a bit later. Hash router is the same thing as presented here. To change hash, it use hash to go through different pages. So basically what would happen is that instead of changing this part, the path, everything under here would change. So this is one page, this is another page, and stuff like that, because this doesn't changing changing of this by JavaScript doesn't force page to reload. So memory router, this guy, this saves data for your changes of your pages in the memory, just a little bit different than, where is it? Then the browser router and static router for static pages isn't used really often. Again, browser router, your way to go. So, little example. So, here I presented you a few basic examples: router, navigation, and road. So router would be your parent component. Everything that would be wrapped inside a router would be changed, might be changed. So component, yeah, this component comes from here, from React DOM, React Router DOM. From here, and as you can see here, it's not just a router, it's exactly browser router. I just use the router name just for simplification. You don't oblige to do that. So inside of this router, we would have a combination of different paths. So here, route to posts, here special route for posts ID, route for about, and route for the situation when none of the components matched. Oh, none of the routes match, sorry. So basically how it's going to work, React would try to match the path, that is this part, would try to match path to every single one from first to second. The first match would go. So here you might want to add property exact, because if you won't add this to here, if you go to the to URL something /post/1, first thing that it would find is post. It matches because it have /post there, and you would get to this page instead of this. So as you can see, they use same component, but yeah, sometimes it's not the case. This part a bit different from this one. It has two dots in front of it. It's used as a dynamic property, let's say like this. So everything that goes after two dots considered as a variable that would hold data that passed here. So as you can see here, no matter what you pass, number, some string, etc., it would go in the ID here. And yeah, I'll show you a bit later how you can work with it. You can access it from this component and work with it to render a specific component, for example. So, yep. So yeah, again, to work with routing like that, you cannot just go with a simple link. This won't work. You have to use a link component from the router library. And it goes and it's used very simply. You just, instead of href, you would use to property, and without any origin, just pass path to it, and this will go. You can also make it a little bit complicated, a little bit more complex if you want. For example, if you want to add some query to it, you need some hash. If you need to pass some state to the component, to this, to the component that was under this, that is under this root, you can use state. Though we usually go with a search. It's not really, you won't need this too often. Yeah, it also can be a function. This would be executed, and basically the some pass name / sort equal name would be passed to the to of this link. You can also have nav link. This is a little bit different from basic link. Let's read from the documentation because it's not really used very often. So it's a special version of the link that would add styling attributes to the rendered element when it matches the current URL. So basically, if you want it to appear, can it? Yeah, it doesn't work. So basically, when you create, for example, just link with tag A, when you visit this link and return back, this would appear purple. If you didn't go through this link, this would be blue. So this is the same thing. If you need this, you can use navlink. And redirect basically would do redirect to this route. Yeah, instead of this syntax, you might want to use, instead of just writing everywhere exact, which most of the time is the case, you might want to use a special component switch. So as you can see here, basically the same thing as just writing, you just wrapping it with a switch, and it would just render one component. So, for example, in this case, which case we'd like to, let's go with, yeah, like this. So I'm going to the just to this kind of slash root, so just basically the origin of my page, like this. I went here. So according to this code, when I go there, this will render. This won't. No, this will, because this matches. This also will, because this again matches, because we have slash. Because basically, when we go to the slash, everything will render, and you can look at this as if case. So if path matches this, I will render this. No else here, just new if. If path matches about, render this. If path matches something, render this. So basically, if we go to about page, again, this would render. Two these things would render. We don't want that. Sometimes we do, but sometimes we don't. So in order to page to render just exact component, and only this component, we might want you to switch. So you kind of switching between different pages here. So here we kind of created an if statement. Here we're just switching between paths to the different components. So here I would render this. Why we want exact? Because we don't want to the situation when we come first and this renders to happen. When we come here and this matches here, this and this, only this will render. So that's why we put here exact. So these two roots won't match, and round page won't be rendered. Yeah, so that's it about Ruta. Maybe you want to ask me some questions. No? Well, I think we'll finish here. Yeah, let's finish here. On this note, we basically covered all React basics. You're free to go. At this point, you can already start writing your application and playing with React. You have everything to successfully do it. Yep, so yeah, I see the question. Great. Didn't catch the difference with the with and without switch. Okay, great. So how can we, maybe we can go to sandbox to be more visible, because yeah, it might be a little bit confusing. Let's go here. Creating React sandbox. Go into our slide with let's go without switch first. What don't you like? Is declared and is never used. Okay, yeah. We'll remove it, don't worry. So I couldn't find dependency React router. External resources. Let's add a dependency. React router, does it have it? No, it doesn't. So this would be just a little demonstration how to use this too. Cool. So we added router here. Can't find variable router. Why? Yeah, okay, because we did not import it. Let's import it here. Let's copy that. Let's pass it here. We don't use link here. Yeah, no. Has already been declared. Cool. Cool. Oh yeah. Should go like this. I think it should work. Hmm? Yeah, no, yeah, cool. Yep, so this just a component. We can't find variable home. Yeah, you can't do that. Let's do it like that just for the sake of the example. So we won't have a parent component, we just have a simple element that would work as well. Element type is element expected a string or a class function but got an object. Yeah, because it's just an element and root expect components. So here I quickly create some basic function components. So basically what it expects is a function, as I told you. What didn't you like? Yeah. And again, we need some fragment here because it won't understand this. Yeah. No. Did you mean or if I use just home, would you understand? Yeah, of course. End of the day, guys. So passing like that. Save. This is about. This is some user. Not found page. Cool. Elements type and will it. Okay. Try need to be imported. Browser. Thank you. Though it's not the. Let's do like this. Let's return to the app because we need a separate component to be imported. Here. Let's call it from the like this. And we'll go like this. Element type is inverted to check the render method of app. Custom. No. Again, same custom router. Check the render method of custom router. What don't you like? Let's go like this first. Class of ocean will got undefined. You like forgot to export your component from the file. Defined. No, I did not. Okay. Maybe I'm missing something. Let's go. Browser. Let's go to browser router. That's not what we want. Sorry. Okay, yeah, problem is here. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot to do that. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay, I did something wrong here. Route and exact path. This should work. Okay, maybe in the rubber, I don't know. No. Okay. Are we mad? You're still mad? Maybe you see something, guys? You can help me. Building components, your class function, and got undefined. You likely forgot to export your components. I do not export it. Bingo. Okay. Now let's go about. Sorry, I was muted. Home, about, and ID. Like that. User. We'll work a bit with ID. I'll show you how to do that. And let's remove exact. No path. Here not found. You already can see what's the problem here. So for this syntax, we again, as I told you, you can look at this path as an if statement. So if path matches this, please render the component that was passed here. You can pass it as a child, just two different syntaxes. I rendered not only home, but also not found, as it doesn't have a path and it would also match everything. Basically, here, let's try go about to about page. I rendered this component as I have about this, as it expects something, just anything after the slash, and just put it in the ID property. And this also matched. So this would match everything. That's not exactly what we want. Sometimes we do, sometimes, but most of the time we don't. So switch will eliminate this problem. As you can see already working, I just wrap this in my switch, and every time I change, let's go to this page, I change, it shows just exactly one component. So it just finds something that matches the path and just goes with it. So basically just a regular switch case thing. This every route is a case with a break. If we don't use switch, it's basically switch but without break. So that's basically the difference between using and not using switch. Depending on your solution, you might want or not want to use switch. For example, you can router doesn't have to be in the highest component. You can put your router inside any child component you want, and without switch you can manipulate your UI however you like. So that might be a nice solution for that too. So about using this, let's go to documentation and search for something like this, just to be sure. So as you can see here, this is an example. This is a redirect from to. That's not what we want. We want some usage of a variable in the path. Something. Okay, never mind. Let's find something. So basically, you can read that from your. Where is it? You can read it from your router. I just need to remember how it's done in the class components. So basically, why it might be confusing for you, there is a new way to create component that was introduced in the latest React hooks. So it introduces a little bit different way for components to work. So as we talked today about stateful and stateless components, as you noticed from the way we use stateful components, it cannot be a functional component. Though functional components are, let me just open it. Functional components are more lightweight, or basically because we do not carry everything from a component class. We just created a simple function. It's easy and it's lightweight and stuff like that. But it doesn't have all the features that class component have. That's not really cool. That sucks. But in the latest React, devs introduce a way to create functional components and be introduced to every nice little thing that class component have. So that's why a lot of things that you can see here, where's router? Here, so few things that you might see how this works in the class component works a little bit different with hooks and functional components. So for React root dynamic root, for hooks it would work a little bit differently. Yeah, here, how to get data from dynamic root like this thing that we want to do. So basically we can get it from our prompts. That's neat. Let's just try it out. Props. And here would be a real component. Would you do a nice thing for me and just beautify everything? Return some, yeah, some, I deleted them. Okay, that's the problem with brackets. This one is the wrong one, and I don't have a closing for, no. This. So let's user ID something. As you can see here, it just passes your ID down. Everything you write here will be passed through this attribute here. So example without switch, with about page still works, though that's not really what we wanted. So with React classes here, you get a lot of stuff that you can work with your router. So let's see what match has. So let's use JSON stringify. See what this have. So we have paths, we have exact URL that we use. That might be a little bit confusing because clearly this is the full URL HTTPS with some gibberish / about, but for your application, for your single page application, URL is only this part. It doesn't know about origin, host, and stuff like that. And this is only about React router, so not like your application doesn't know. Your application might know from the window.location if you want to know location. So is no React. Okay, let's stringify it too. So you still would have access to all the fancy stuff that is held in window location. Here it is, all the fancy stuff, href, full URL, protocol, and stuff like that. But React Router doesn't know about it. Unfortunately, it knows just about this stuff is exact true. This is about matching. You might need it, might not. Some parameters. This is where we get everything that we pass in this attribute from. So yeah, that's basically how it goes. Like that. So maybe some more question. Did I explain it to you? Cool. Great. Yep. So we kind of worked through our 1.5 hour limit. So that's great. And thank you guys for the participation, and see you in the next lecture. Bye bye.